Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this is a very important moment to eulogize the fallen third President of the Republic of Kenya, President Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki. And I start by reading a quote that is very famously attributed to him. The leadership is a privilege to better the lives of others. It is not an opportunity to satisfy personal greed. Another quote that is associated with our fallen president is that when he faced a challenge in the 1988 Kano nominations, he still won, but he said that even rigging has manners. And Madam Speaker, the shambolism that is associated with party nominations has been rampant across the political divide, and it has been used to deny the country of great leadership or people who have contrary opinion as and when this happens, and especially because even the turnout is usually very low to the detriment of good leadership. And I think at times, going by his assertion about leadership and rigging, is that then you've got to make a covenant with the devil. If you decide to rig yourself into power, and as it has been said before, political corruption is the mother of all corruption. That is the malaise that has affected our leadership in this country, to the extent that then we've not really gotten the dividend of our democratic engagement. Okay. I want to say, Madam Speaker, that personally, I stand here very happy because the fallen president, and you can hear the trumpets of the brass band as his body is being escorted out of Parliament, is that the president came to power on a wheelchair. This is very, very significant. He had gotten an accident, and he ended up being on a wheelchair as a result. And it's out of this, Madam Speaker, that President Mwai Kibaki promulgated the Persons with Disabilities Act number 14 of 2003 into law. That was a watershed because it enabled persons with disabilities whose bill had actually been in limbo in this Parliament for 10 years, since 1993, to see light of day. And it is actually out of that I myself, in 2004, under the leadership of my colleague, Senator George Ochilo Opondo Ayako, Judge Mbogo, I was appointed to sit in the first board of the National Council for Persons with Disabilities, a body that was created to superintend over the affairs of people with disabilities by ensuring the implementation of the very law that created that body. So yes, I am a direct beneficiary of the leadership of President Mwai Kibaki in 2004. But earlier on also, it was quite interesting because there was a very serious scheme to deny him to become president. Because when I first registered as a voter in 2002, I couldn't vote for President Kibaki. The reason is many names that started with O and M had been omitted in the voter register. And even at some point, I think Raila Odinga's name was missing at Olympic Primary School, if I remember, in 2002, December 29th. But be that as it may, he still went ahead and won resoundingly with over 2 million votes at 63% of the vote. And that is how he was declared president, Yote Yawezekana, under the NAC banner. It should be remembered that President Mwai Kibaki kind of became a president by accident. He had tried to become president in 1992. He became, a good number 3, although in politics there's no number 2 or 3. In 1997, he became number 2, and then eventually he was a president of consensus because the then opposition formed the National Alliance Party of Kenya, NA, in bracket PK, and it was a constituent party of DP, the Democratic Party, a party that he founded, NAC, SDP, I beg your pardon, and such other parties that came together. And later on, they were joined by LDP, led by the then KANU renegades, under the leadership of Raila Odinga and others like George Saitoti, may so rest in peace, Kalonzo Musyoka, and others. So he really got into power, and there was a lot of hope. Over 500,000 people, thronged Uhuru Park to see his swearing in. And there was a lot of desire to change this country. Indeed, I remember, as a young university student that time, there was a lot of hopelessness in this country. The economy was in the doldrums. And I remember knocking the doors of Parliament there, the Continental House, bringing my friend Martin Obiero Okumu to see his then Member of Parliament, the late Archbishop Ondieki, who had replaced our senior James Orengo as a member for Ugenya, because Martin Obiero Okumu, a blind man, I was his guide, was looking for school fees. And we were chased very badly at the gates there. We couldn't be allowed to be close to Parliament at that time. But it was good because we learned our lessons, although we went through college. Again, the benefits of a Kibaki government were again to have a direct impact on me, because student leadership was banned in all public universities, Madam Speaker. I remember at that time we could have been at the university as a vice chancellor in Mwai. And when it was reinstated, I happened to have been elected as a student leader at Kenyatta University, one out of the 7 student leaders at the Kenyatta University Student Association, together with my dear sister, Gladys Wanga, the incoming governor of Homa Bay. So it was really that, gesture that those who had clamored for reforms at the university level, that they got an opportunity to exercise leadership under the new democratic dawn that the NAC administration, birthed, of course, under the leadership of President Mwai Kibaki. And I remember we led a protest against the then Vice Chancellor, George Eshuani, may so rest in peace. And it's out of that that also President Kibaki gave us a new Vice Chancellor, Professor Everett Maraka Standa, the poet, who, of course, ended up governing the university in a better way. So I am here standing as a direct beneficiary of President Mwai Kibaki's leadership. And further to it, I remember, with a lot of nostalgia, that there was a boom of the economy. So much so that many of my colleagues who finished school with us were able to get jobs within their first year, that they did not tarmac for long, because the banks who were employing, they were hooking loans, there are so many businesses, credit was available, and it is that inspiration. In fact, I was speaking to Jimmy Kibaki, the son, this morning as I went to view, after I had viewed the body, that is the inspiration of the Kenya Kwanza, the UDA, a bottom-up economic model. That you can actually stimulate the economy from the bottom up and create many opportunities for so many millions of people. And it is very, very well documented in terms of macroeconomics. That's the only way you can ensure a country has been able to rise again. But if you have a very constricted economy, with very few people at the top, I think it's very, very, very serious that then you create a lot of poverty. And I've just come from a very fractious and engaging, grueling campaign process, and the levels of poverty that have been created in the last 10 years, it's horrible. It's horrible, Madam Speaker. We have actually regulated so many people in the doldrums of poverty. And that is not what a government should do. It's a total failure. When President Kibaki left office, he left the country with a public debt of 1.8 trillion because he borrowed very well every year about 200 billion for infrastructure projects. And at that point in time, the economy was financed locally, domestically, at 93% of the GDP. We were only borrowing about 6%. Today, all of our development budget is borrowed because of poor fiscal economic strategy. When he was there in power, I remember as a young, public servant, at a very young age of 22 years, having gotten my first government appointment, we used to practice what you call the medium-term expenditure framework. This was a 3-year budgeting cycle so that you would know your resource envelope 3 years in advance in terms of it was incremental. Today, it's yearly, and about 8,000 government projects have yet to be implemented because they are whimsical. And I remember the president saying when he took over power in 2003, that the country shall not be led under the whims of an individual. He believed in the rule of law. And as a result, Madam Speaker, he promulgated the new constitution in 2010. He never felt the embarrassment as to the loss in 2005 no referendum that he lost actually to his erstwhile political nemesis in government and allies, led by Raila Odinga. He still kept the fire burning. And it is actually rumored and documented, actually ready to relinquish power because he was a Democrat in 2007 until some forces prevailed upon him. And of course, there was the Grand Coalition government. But even then, he was very witty, an intelligent man, because when he constituted his first cabinet, he only appointed 17 members of the cabinet, I can remember very well, and left the other 17 to the then opposition. Even if the cabinet later on was, increased to 42 odd members, so that then we could be able to have ODM and PNU coalition, get into power. He's a president who never really, glorified himself. He removed his face from the currency even before this current constitution so provided. The only currency that bears his portrait is a 40 bob, coin, just because it was a new one. But otherwise, he refused to have himself named after every other thing that he launched. And for that, we remain grateful to him. In fact, even as recently as I think 1 or 2 years ago, he was approached to have the Odaya Referral Hospital named after him, but he actually recommended it be named Kenyatta National Hospital Annex. That's a great man. I think all of us would run at the slightest opportunity to name anything after ourselves because we feel that is the only way we can be remembered. So President Mwai Kibaki, the great economist, the great orator, who I think in 1982 was named in the Times magazine as one of the 100 greatest leaders. For sure, he lived up to this expectation. At some point, of course, people were disillusioned with his leadership because maybe in the way in which he spoke. I think he was very intelligent because people may have taken him for a fool because of the manner he presented himself in public, but that made him to survive the longest. He survived many people. At some point, he was called a perennial fence-eater. In fact, he was called a general Kigwea, but he finished last, and he finished strong. I am happy that if you look at the biblical years of 70 years, he actually became president at the age of 72. And so therefore, he has lived his life to the full at the age of 90, almost 91, to see to it even that his successors, almost at the tail end of his successor, President Uhuru Kenyatta, who he also happened to have had the privilege of being his godfather upon his baptism. So President Mwai Kibaki then was a star, because that is to mean the first President Jomo Kenyatta must have identified that he had a great future as to occasion a situation where he would be the godfather of his own son. So this is a great man from the word go. Not a typical politician per se. He borders on the academic, Madam Professor Speaker, because you see he was plucked from Makerere University. In fact, very interestingly, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was impressed by the manifesto of the then ruling party under Milton Obote in Uganda. And he asked, you have a very good manifesto. He said, actually, it's not us who did it. There's a young Kenyan in Makerere who did it. It happened to be Mwai Kibaki. So Mwai Kibaki is the one who had actually made the manifesto of the then ruling party, for Milton Obote's government. And that is how Jomo Kenyatta, Jaramogi Oginga, I beg your pardon, was able to invite him to become the executive officer of the then KANU party, and he rose to become, an executive officer stroke permanent secretary, and he rose from there up. He's a man we can see who was able to change with the times. When he couldn't secure Donholm, Bahati that time, he moved to Nyeri, and he formed his base very well. When he couldn't take it in, I think he still stayed there and waited for the opportune moment to start his DP party. I can imagine the embarrassment he went through when he had to be dropped as the vice president, and he was still retained in cabinet as Minister for Health. It must have been a very trying moment. He stayed for 10 good years in the opposition. I wonder whether he would have become a good president, Madam Speaker, had he not stayed in the opposition for those 10 good years. I think it's a question of seasoning. So that then, by the time he became president, then he knew the suffering of Kenyans, because if you live in this bubble of leadership after leadership, you may actually be bereft of the realities of the people that you want to lead. So I think he was meant for the moment. I'm afraid under the Jubilee administration that I have served and I've campaigned very seriously for, we've rolled back the economic gains that he had made. If we had continued with that legacy, we've actually we've eaten it off, and we are about 15 years back where we were before. Yes, indeed, there is a question of whether the issue of devolution and an expanded government, the 2 tiers of government, then is a reason. I beg to differ, because I remember President Kibaki struggling with the new governors led by Alfred Mutua and others who were then vocal, by him insisting that we are a unitary government. It's only that in an expansionist and building behavior of public servants, we didn't scale down what had been devolved as to occasion a reduction of government expenditure at the national level. Why, for example, today would 98 billion be used at the national headquarters of the Ministry of actually opened up with public universities to in a very big way. And it's out of that we have had so many people graduate. The quality may be arguable, but at least today, so many people have gotten degrees that they would not have otherwise gotten. So he was very futuristic in terms of education. And as someone may have said earlier on, Kimani Maruge, an 84-year-old man, showed up in school. In fact, Bill Clinton, former president of America, when he was asked who he wanted to meet, he said, I want to meet Mwai Kibaki. Because when he became president, he actually provided free education, and a million children showed up in classroom, in school. And he came all the way from America to come and have a chat with President Mwai Kibaki. I also remember him being hosted in Washington by the then President George Bush. It was very, very important that the Democratic Party leader was an icon of democracy. Is a man that even if we look at the current celebrations, they are not overrated and are being outdone like the way it has been done before on other people. And that in itself, that mien, that quiet, demeanor is very, very important. I was speaking to Jimmy Kibaki today, and he told me that it is the first time that he's stepping in Parliament today, for the first time, this time, because even when his father had served here for 10 terms, 50 years, he never allowed public service to be mixed with family. And that's the reason why that even he stayed at State House, so that he could have more time with his family, and so that grandchildren could visit him. So he separated family and public office, something that maybe some of us are not very good at doing. And it's a lesson that we may want to learn from him, so there's some form of stability going forward. So, Madam Speaker, I stand here tall, happy that we have a role model that we can look up to, someone who put the country first, and he was paid for it. The journey was arduous, it was treacherous. He had to really wait for so long to become president. He was bypassed by so many people who looked better and good than him, but still, the hand of God still made sure that he became the best president that I can say confidently here, out of the 4 presidents. He shines, he stands tall, he's a man who really, should be emulated. I want to end by a story that I read, a friend of mine was telling me about, that he was a policeman at State House, but he had taken a whole night watching football and he was fatigued. And he decided to sleep in a banana plantation at State House, one of the quarters, because it's a big piece of land. And then when he was sleeping, he only woke up when somebody tapped on him, only to find the commander-in-chief was asking, oh, where unajificha hapa? And they had a very good conversation, but he still let him to go and asked him, are you happy because I have increased the salary for the policemen? He made a lot of police reforms. And finally, Madam Speaker, the 2010 Constitution that he promulgated, that has mentioned persons with disabilities 18 times, is the same Constitution that has enabled me to stand here today, first in the 11th Parliament as a nominated member of the National Assembly, and today as a nominated senator. It is the same Constitution when I was being illegally removed from the Senate that defended me under the rule of law, and after 7 months I was able to come back to finish my term. I thank God for President Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki, a great man who lived in this country. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Honorable Senators, we still have 5 members